As with any community-based hobby whose members spend far too much time on the internet, the keyboard hobby has had its fair share of controversies over the years. Like, did you know Elon Musk actually designed the original cyberboard? Did you know that Gateron and Kale started off as Cherry MX clone companies? That's right, the colours aren't just a coincidence. No, that one is actually true. If the keyboard hobby is something that you've stumbled upon recently, or you spend far less time than me using an overpriced keyboard to search on the internet for more information about overpriced keyboards, then you may have missed some of the major controversial talking points of the past few years, their influence on the hobby, and the result of them. So go get your obsidian, boys, we're diving into the nether of the keyboard hobby. Starting off with one of the biggest ones of the past few years, we have the now dubbed Zealios controversy. All the way back in 2019, before KTT switches and the like, before any actual decent factory loo jobs or, well, keyboard switches actually being in stock, acquiring your endgame switch was something of a challenge, with a few notable names above the rest, and people taking out bank loans to buy a whole board's worth of holy pandas on the aftermarket. Around this time, Zeal really held the spotlight in terms of what a good premium keyboard switch should be, albeit at a more than premium price point, with other hypertactiles coming in hot, fresh off the holy panda wave. One of these hypertactiles being the KBD Fans T1, which claimed to have 95% of the feeling of the holy panda, with only the sound being different. But back to Zeal, and the fake Zealios V2 and Zealios V2 switches that were being manufactured by a manufacturer other than Gateron and being sold under the guise of real Zeal materials. This came to the forefront of the community when Zeal PC themselves made a post about it, highlighting the production of fake stabilizers along with their flagship switches. The post said that KBD fans had been knowingly selling the fake switches for around 6 months, with Way from KBD fans responding with a very simple apology and that they had acquired the switches from a source other than Zeal and that they were significantly cheaper. The drama had seemed to stop here. This was until a Z Frontier post was made introducing 2 new individuals into the mix, one of which, Lee, claimed to have created the T1 as well as being one of the original founders of Gateron. Lee had started their own micro switch factory, Duroc, and had designed the T1s to match the hypertactile keyboard switch meta that was around at the time. Their post claimed that the other individual, Sai, who was under an NDA at the time, bought top housings from Gateron and the rest of the parts from Lee. These were what were then sold to KBD fans under the guise of being real Zealios and Zealios. No one really knows the truth behind all this, and if you want to have a deeper dive into it, I'll link the article written by Theremin Goat about it in the description. What's most interesting to me about this controversy is that this didn't halt JWK or Duroc in their switch production at all, with some of the most noticeable switches in the hobby coming soon after this, and not to mention the Duroc V2 stabilizers that held the top spot for stabilizers in the hobby for many, before the era of TX or Stabies. Now, if you thought that was enough switch drama, you'd be wrong. Within the same ballpark came the controversy surrounding the Holy Pandas, the Mass Drop Pandas, Jesus, and the Glorious Holy Pandas. Now, the Holy Panda in today's era of the hobby are prominent and were the first hypertactile to hit the market, as a result of a Franken switch made by one of the writers over at Top Black. What made these switches then cost so much on the aftermarket was the fact that the switches that comprised these were 1, a failed linear switch that only had a single run a year prior to the discovery of the Holy Panda and stopped production after this, and 2, a tactile stem from a switch that was only available through buying a keyboard from Mass Drop. This is where we get our first bit of drama. The Halo switch itself. The switch was meant to be a collaborative effort by Mass Drop and Input Club, but later Mass Drop claimed to have exclusive rights to the switch and refused to sell any to Input Club for their keyboard that was in the production phase of its Kickstarter. This led Input Club to having to design a whole new switch for their keyboard. But back to the Holy Panda, which at this point was selling for between $4 to $6 per switch. Members of the community tried to bring it back, which in this IC by Reddit user Saint Bowen was met with much skepticism, but most interestingly from the original designer behind the Panda switch. They claimed that the original tooling had been damaged, and the more recent samples they ordered from Bsun had different molds, resulting in clips that were nowhere near as tight as the original switches. Explaining that both the creators of the Invir Panda and other commenters were wrong, and that he did have the original tooling, while talking about sending out switches for testing to Quackums from Top Clack and others, St. Bowen moved the conversation over to Geekag, where, well, it turned into a little bit of a meme. This resulted in comments to rename the switch the Jesus switch so that people could type on Holy Jesus. When it came close to the release of the switch, St. Bowen, who had already purchased the minimum order quantity for this switch, was met with mixed opinions over the $1 per switch price tag, and this ultimately led him to drop the price to 60 cents after a few days of smoke. On the same thread, it became apparent that Mass Drop were working on their own Holy Panda switches, which posed the question of whether the Jesus Panda would be needed after all. Well, spoiler alert, the Jesus Pandas were actually quite successful. They pretty much started the linear panda craze of the time period, with Novelkeys releasing the Yok Panda line shortly after, and obviously all the panda switches that now exist in the hobby. but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Now, the Drop Holy Panda couldn't escape controversy of its own. The first of which being that Drop claimed that they had the original Panda tooling. Heard that one before, haven't we? The initial release had a far lower price point than subsequent runs. I would have thought they did this to try and deter people from going all in on the Jesus Pandas, with the later runs costing the equivalent of buying the 2 Switches needed to make the Holy Panda at retail value. The R2 for the Holy Panda was advertised as sporting an all-POM housing and would come completely unlubed as requested by those in the community. In the batches that were shipped out, some reported factory lube while others didn't, as well as the fact that through testing conducted by many members of the community, it was deduced that the housing wasn't actually all POM as advertised. Fuming. And this brings me on to the glorious Holy Panda, which, for the third time, it was claimed that the original tooling hadn't been damaged nor destroyed, and in fact it was Glorious who had their hands on the original molds. Now, this wasn't met with the greatest reception from the community as a whole, especially as the Halo stem, which is what made the Panda truly holy, was owned by Drop. And so individuals didn't like the fact that they had called the product Holy Panda, claiming they were just riding the wave from the hype. This really hit the ceiling when it was revealed that the company had gone for the trademark of the Holy Panda. As you can imagine, the community weren't impressed to say the least, claiming this big company was gunning for community products to make a quick buck. However, it's not all doom and gloom, and the CEO of Glorious released a statement over on RMK, apologising to the community and stating that the trademark request had been withdrawn. And at this point, love or hate them, the Glorious Panda is definitely a Switch that many people look at when they first get into this hobby. Now, there's far more to all these stories than I've gone into today, so I'll link a few articles by some other creators in the description if you want to delve into the controversy a little bit deeper. Now, all this Switch drama aside, I'm sure the one thing that puts so many people off when they first get into the hobby is the group buy model that is pretty much the standard for us at this point. And while phrases like "do your due diligence" get passed around more than a TGR Jane at a keyboard meetup, that doesn't mean that some group buys have run into problems unbeknownst to those entering them, whether this is scamming, communication, or quality issues, especially in the earlier years of the hobby when group buys were run through people themselves, as opposed to the specific design studios we now tend to have in the hobby. Nor were there the array of well-respected vendors that we have in the space now. One of the most controversial ones many years back wasn't a single group buy, but many run in parallel by a moderator over on KeebCats. Ivan, who was not only a moderator but a well-respected member of the community at the time, was running 3 group buys concurrently: the RS-84 keyboard kit, GMK Miami Nights, and PBT Dark. After some time it went by with no updates, buyers started to get concerned, but were reassured by Ivan claiming he was busy and that the group buy was still in the process of being fulfilled. This was until the designer of the RS-84 posted on the thread that they had not received production numbers, nor had they received payments from Ivan. As you can imagine, people who had entered the group buy weren't happy to say the least, especially as now 180 days have passed, meaning PayPal disputes were no longer feasible to get a refund. When news of this broke, it also became apparent that GMK Miami Nights wasn't happening either. After contacting GMK directly, who responded saying that the buy had come to an abrupt end due to receiving no payment. And to really put a nail in the coffin, those who were in for the PBT Dark set found out that Ivan had received the sets but not paid the manufacturer, and due to lack of contact there was little hope these were going to be fulfilled either. The original designer of the RS-84, unaffiliated with Ivan's group buy, offered 10 free boards through raffle to those who were in on the group buy, as well as a discount for the next group buy that he was going to run. But even this meant that the majority was still left out of pocket. Ultimately, Ivan never showed his face on the forums again, and it left many members questioning the legitimacy of the group buy model. I guess something people even today question, right? There was radio silence from him until PBT Dark sets started appearing for sale on eBay under the same name as his PayPal a few years later. Obviously, it had run out of the original 40-odd grand that he had stolen. Shocking. A little earlier than the Ivan drama, there were significant problems relating to a group called Team Redline. They were a group of 3 members, one of whom you might remember from my last video, Lifezone. They ran group buys over on KeebCats promising Korean products with USA distribution, and for a while they had a very good reputation within the community. Following a few group buys, one of the members, Druggy Arm, mysteriously disappeared with no contact to anyone. Both Lifezone and the third member of the group, Girl DC, made statements on the vendor forum, when understandably their legitimacy following everything that had happened was being questioned. This led to people asking questions on the Korean keyboard forums, both KBD Lab and KBD Mania, surrounding Druggy R, or as he was known on there, Jackass's disappearance. It seemed as though he could not be reached by phone, email, or text, and even after visiting his home, he was nowhere to be seen. With the case starting to look like fraud, KBD Lab stated that they would open a civil case against him for damages. At the time, he was running 3 different group buys. DSA Dolch, CMYW, and GMK two-tone beige, with the scam estimating to equate between $70,000 and $100,000. Although Girl DC and Lifezone weren't a part of the scams, many individuals still wanted them banned from the forums, with the whole event putting strain on the relationships between the English-speaking and Korean-speaking keyboard communities. Although no one really knows what happened to Drug ER, Girl DC posted on GeekHack in 2015 that he had turned himself into the police following a post he'd made on KBD Lab, both apologising for the hurt that he'd caused and agreeing to pay back the compensation little by little, although this never ended up happening, nor does anyone know whether he actually turned himself into the police after all. Damn, that was a bit intense, wasn't it? Obviously, the group buy model isn't completely doomed, and a few, albeit more serious cases, shouldn't ruin the model for the designers running very legitimate buys. Saying this, there's been some over the years that may not have acted with any malicious intent, but caused quite a bit of controversy over the sheer length of time that they took to fulfill, or are still taking to fulfill. Hell, there's even a website for this. One of the most notorious ones is Gasket 00, which 3 years down the line, we only have around 80% of orders shipped out. The GeekHack thread is still active, so if there's something you want to learn more about, I'll link it in the description. Now, I could finish the video talking about clone keycaps, but I don't really want the comment section being a debate of clones versus GMK. So instead, I'll leave you with this. Stealing is bad. Jokes aside, in a hobby that is built up by the community and wouldn't even exist without its online presence, it's no wonder there has been a lot of controversy over the years. But I think in a way, it sparks conversations that should probably be had, helps the wider community come together on shared issues, or can even just brighten your day scrolling a thread of Jesus memes on a mechanical keyboard forum. Now, that's all I had on keyboard controversies. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Preferably not on clone keycaps, please. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't already. All my socials linked down below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you nerds in the next one. Peace.